Hello. uh, got a bunch of questions here that people have been asking me. One of them is, how do you make your website responsive? Now, when I first got a job at a web design shop, I think it was 2011 or 12 or something, and the industry had just changed. These little phones had come out. There was all different size screens. Flash, which was a way of building interactive website application things, was going away because Steve Jobs said it was not going to be allowed on the iPhone. So that option was going away, and we had to make things responsive. The media query option was sort of created slash discovered for CSS. That became a new thing. And the boss at the design shop, who was always on the phone talking to customers and stuff like that, he would always say, we're going to make your website mobile responsive. And this was because they already had a website. They already had a website for a long time. It was probably 960 pixels wide. And now they needed it to work on the phone. They needed to take what they had and make it work on a phone. So saying make something responsive made sense 10 years ago. But now we need to flip the script here, or whatever. You need to turn it upside down and read it the right way, and just understand that the website is responsive by default. The website is already responsive before you even make it. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to open up a CodePen, which is a little sandbox where I can write HTML and CSS quickly and show you. Most of the time when I'm tutoring people or meeting people or showing them things, they'll open up the CodePen and it'll look like this. And they'll have three boxes at the top and then a little window down at the bottom. And so they will start writing stuff. So they'll say like heading, level 1, happening here. And they'll put some lorem ipsum in there. And they'll create all this stuff. And then they'll look at the bottom and they'll think, oh man, this doesn't look right. I gotta start, making it look like a website. I gotta make it have all these boxes and stuff, and then they'll make all these boxes. Just a simple change in how you use these tools can make all the difference. If you go to change view, you have some options for how this is laid out. I always seem to work this way. So in this case, I don't need the JavaScript. Let's just get that out of the way. I have this HTML at the top. I have my CSS here, and I can create a situation where this looks like a phone to begin with. As you could tell, it's already responsive. There's nothing you can do to break this page. When you have, hundreds of thousands of people writing HTML, they planned ahead. You got to make sure everything works. We don't know how long these documents are going to be. You could put 20 miles of HTML on this page. No matter what happens, these native block level elements just know how to stack on top of each other. The kind of inline like span type of phrasing content inside of those blocks goes and just kind of wraps around. It's already responsive as long as you don't tell it not to be responsive. I'll just save that. This way you can change it. You don't need to go get a special browser that shows you iPhone 5, iPhone 6, iPhone 7, iPhone 8. Just think about it as 320 pixels probably being the smallest phone, and throughout the entire process, just check it out. See when it starts to look ugly. When it starts to look ugly, make a breakpoint, and that's when you'll make a little bit of a layout change. Let me just open this CodePen in its own little debugger type of window thing. The other situation that's like this is I'll be working with some students, and sometimes they'll be trying to code on some sort of Microsoft Surface tablet or something that's pretty small, like an iPad size. And they'll be touching the screen with their hands and it's small and we don't have that much room. And then they'll have the developer tools open, and they'll have the developer tools open on the bottom like this. Look at all of this kind of space. You don't need all this space down here. So just like we did in the CodePen, you can come over here, and I think there's some choice somewhere. let's see. Yeah, here we go. The 3 dots, and you can move it to the right. I know that's like the opposite of the way I did it in the CodePen. I don't know why I do it this way, but this is how I do it when I'm building something this way. This way I can see the numbers here and go down to 320, and I know this is what I'm working with, and then I can start to break things up. For example, maybe we want some columns in these paragraph things. So you could come in here, and you should probably have these things in different sections. So maybe we'll put some sections there. Then we can just hook into the section here and say, I don't know, columns. How do you spell columns? I never use columns. Column 2? I don't know. Columns? Like I said, it's been a while. But you don't want columns on the little screen. And so if you're working with it on a big screen and you have it like this, you're just not in the right mindset to begin with. This is where this whole breakpoint idea comes in. You got to learn about these little media queries. So you're looking at it on a phone, and then when it gets to the point where the lines start to get too long, you don't really want to look at more than 12 or 14 words at a time, then you can break into columns, and you just have to start feeling it out. There isn't a perfect breakpoint for every website. You don't want to think about it as this phone and this stuff. And I mean, I understand why people think about it that way. It made sense at one time, but now there are so many phone sizes that you just need to think about it in this sort of fluid context and start to identify site-wide breakpoints that you can reuse. In my case, I just picked 600. Who knows what I would actually do, but I might go 2 columns there, and then once I get to 900, maybe make 2 columns here, and there's a whole bunch of different things you could do. But my point is, if you think about it as a fluid context to begin with, and you work with the code this way the whole time, instead of finishing what we think of as a website with a header and some columns and a sidebar, and then trying to work your way back, you need to just think about it as the phone. The phone's where you look at everything anyways. I think it's up to like 80% of viewership is going to be on your phone. So think about it as the phone, and then as it gets bigger, think about, as soon as we have more real estate, we can add some more interesting layout stuff. But really, the phone is the 100% most important thing. And really, I take that back. There's even more important things than how the website actually looks. The web crawlers need to be able to crawl it, the data and all of the information and the HTML needs to be correct. People with assistive technology needs to be able to access the site, and all of the things we can't even imagine for the future. Alexa and all these things that have come out recently are new and different ways of accessing the internet that we didn't think we would be doing. But who knows, maybe we'll just be like hooking into our neural networks and things and just thinking about what we want to search for and finding it. You never know. It's not the visual thing isn't the most important thing to think about, but it's what we're talking about today. There's also one other little trick, and in CodePen, if you go to the cog in the HTML window, you can see this stuff for head, because in these sandboxes, you're already assuming you're inside the body element. So they don't have the regular head like you'd have in a standard HTML document, which is sometimes that magic could be tricky. Since this isn't a coding tutorial, this is, I'm just trying to give you a different perspective. You can see that you can insert this meta viewport tag here, and that basically tells the phone, like, please treat me like I'm a normal website. Don't try to zoom out and fit an old school website on your phone, which is what they did. When the phones first came out, they had to deal with all the websites that were not ready for phones. They were I'm sure you've seen them. It's like a little tiny mini version of your website shows up on the phone, and you can try to zoom, and they're pretty much useless. But they were better than nothing. They were better than just a totally broken website or a super zoomed in website, or who knows what would have happened. The default is to kind of like zoom out like that. And that's what this little direction that we put inside the HTML head tells it to just treat it like a modern website, basically. The other thing you can do is on your local network, you can just look at this on your phone. So I can change view. I don't know what it is here anymore. I haven't used it in a while, but I could just take this and I could go into my messages. In CodePen, it's called Live View. So I could go in here, I could find myself, send it to myself on the phone. And there, like, have it right there. So now if I'm in CodePen, and see if I type one hand. Buddy red. I don't know, I had to refresh. So it wasn't totally live, but I might be doing it wrong. The point is, you can be developing on here. You can have your friend sit next to you. Ivy is often sitting next to me, and she's playing with the website and saying, this doesn't feel right, and turning it and doing all different stuff, looking at it on an iPad. I'm scrolling the screen and making the window bigger and smaller. And we're just feeling out all of the different breakpoints and how it feels on all these devices the entire time we're building it. We're not finishing a website and then sending it off to a QA team. You kind of have to be your own QA team. Everyone on the team needs to be constantly working with the product and seeing how it works, whether it's a little tiny website for a friend or whether it is QuickBooks or some kind of huge app that millions of people use. Another thing you can do in CodePen is you can sometimes you need to open the dev tools over here. Sometimes the built-in console in CodePen isn't enough. So this is really cool because now I have my little phone size thing. I can kind of look at it, test out some ideas in here possibly. I might need to write some JavaScript on the fly or do some debugging of some sort. And I'm still thinking about this always as this never-ending length of phone size website. And I highly suggest you do the same because I'm seeing so many boot camp graduates so proud to show their final projects, and they worked hard on them, and they learned Mongo and NPM and Node, and they made this whole CRUD app. And then you look at it on the phone, and it's just completely unusable. It looks insane. I would show them to you, but I just feel too bad. I would have to recreate it somehow and show it to you because I wouldn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. All right, I found an example app and just changed how it looked a little bit, changed the name and things like that so you can just see what I'm talking about. It looks fine right here, right? I mean, doesn't look that great. It doesn't necessarily have any headings or stuff. So that's a typography issue. And I don't think that they're really teaching that in these code bootcamp schools. They're just teaching you how to do the CRUD application, the whole create, read, update, delete, database, hook it up, get people to log in. So, maybe that's not their job is to teach that. But if I open up the developer tools and like how we're talking, I show you this, and then this is what you're going to see on the phone. I mean, it's just unacceptable. It's unacceptable that these schools are teaching people like this, It's crazy. It doesn't look that bad right here, but it still looks really bad. I mean, this is how iPad's going to look. I mean, what are all these MUI, grid, root, MUI, paper? This is using a probably material design or something, some kind of material UI. This is supposedly a fancy user interface CSS framework. So it's and these are all like there's just a million divs and a million horrible classes, and it's just this is really confusing looking HTML, and it's with React, and it's just so many tools being thrown at a project to have the very most basic human part of it ignored. But the point is, if you're going to school for 3 months, 6 months, and you're working on this every day, and at the end you have a website that doesn't work on the phone, well, I don't know who to blame, yourself or the school, but it's 2020. It's almost 2021. The website has to work on the phone. This is how to reset your mind to make that happen. There's a lot of different techniques. It's not just media queries. It's understanding Flexbox. Sometimes you want to get some new grid involved, but I don't think grid is the silver bullet for everything. Learn Flexbox well. Don't ever use floats. Try to stay away from Bootstrap and all that stuff. They did good when we needed them, but we don't need them anymore. And just practice feeling it out, feeling what it looks like on a phone, looking at it. It needs to be pleasurable, enjoyable. You need to be able to read it. That's what matters most. Then when you get to bigger size screens, you can try some cooler stuff out. Maybe you want to load some 3JS animations or something, and you can progressively enhance the page to do that so it's not loaded on a phone or something like that. Every chance you have more screen real estate, you don't always need to fill it up with stuff either. White space is really great. Maybe make your website look like a messy desk or something. It always depends on what you're doing. But the point is to have content-driven, small screen first thought process, and then to think of the extra space on the desktop as a little more canvas to work with to do some fun stuff or try some different layout techniques and things like that. In the program at Perpetual Education, we definitely teach like this from day one because we use the history of the web as a framework to kind of explain how things changed and all that stuff. Like we'll actually teach you how to make websites like this, but then we'll also have a project where we'll teach you how to make a website with complete absolute positioning like we would do in 2010 possibly. And then we'll use that as an example to show you how horrible it is. Then we'll remake that with percentages, and we'll talk about all the different units you could use and the pros and cons of each of them. We have lots and lots of layout challenges. We really drill in layout challenges just because it seems like people have the hardest time with HTML and CSS. They write terrible HTML and they write terrible CSS. Even professional developers who have been doing it for 20 years have confided in me when I've showed them some of this stuff and said, I just was fighting it. I didn't want to learn it. Nothing worked when I tried it. And there's a lot of reasons why that happens to people. A lot of it's education. People don't learn the difference between display block elements, phrasing content, inline elements, and how they all work together. You can't put a margin on an inline element. You can't set the width of an inline element. Yet we want to make the buttons and the links big and touchable, but they're inline by default. But if you didn't know that, you really have to take stock of what elements are which, how they work together, when it's beneficial to switch them, different scenarios. There's lots of common patterns that everyone takes for granted now, but the first time you understand a drop-down menu or something like that and how all of these different positioning things work together. I think there's a way to learn it. And if you learn it in exactly the right steps, it's all super pleasurable and you'll say, what was the big deal? Or you can just hack stuff together for an entire career and still never know how to do it. I don't suggest you learn it that way. So, not everyone could go to our school, but you can join the CSS Discord, and I'll leave that in the links if there's links here or something. The Mozilla MDN documentation, the HTML resources, shows all of the elements, describes when they should be used, doesn't always tell you their default inline block type of display property because that's sort of up to the browser. We were talking about adding it, but it's a little bit tricky. The CSS references tell you about every different property and how you can make different rules. And you just need to think of those two things as your toolboxes. Here are all my elements. Here are all the ways I can describe these elements, and practice, practice, practice. But don't start band-aiding things up. Remember, it's responsive to begin with. So if something's happening, if you're setting heights on things and you're setting explicit widths on things, well, that's why things are the size that they are, because you told them to be that way, and now they're not responsive. That's why they're not responsive. So the HTML and the CSS does exactly what you tell it to do. It's about learning how to tell it to understand what you want it to do, and then telling it to do what you want it to do, as opposed to trying to think about how you want it to look and then dealing with the aftermath.